Guys, I'm running so low on copium over here. I know that Bioware has drunk the woke Kool-Aid for many, many years now. I noticed how they steadily started including so many different modern politics and issues in their games, and not in an effort to be inclusive, but in an effort to preach and talk down to us about what is morally correct and what we should think and feel regarding these issues. But after so many financial flops, I thought that maybe Bioware had learned a lesson here and that they would go back to the roots. But this was just the final straw for me to realize that the Bioware that I knew and loved, the studio that essentially made my childhood, has been long gone. And before anyone starts screaming that, oh my god, Bioware has always been woke, if you hadn't noticed, you are not a real fan and you are just a tourist. Well, if you think that, I would recommend you watch this video right here about why Bioware has not always been woke, as you so vehemently proclaim. Now, let's get back to why the top surgery scars, the pronouns, and all these modern day issues are just so obviously there just for them to have a way to pander to a minority, but more importantly, why these things represent a bigger threat for the gaming industry and the people who support this kind of thing. I am editing this in just to say that I emphasize the word minority in an effort to emphasize their numbers and not their identities. So put the pitchforks away, put out the torches, and let's have a normal conversation about this, shall we? So, entire industries are pandering to a minority that will not even show up to support their game, or even if they do, they are still a minority. So, the income generated by them is not nearly enough to keep them in business. They even mention in the Veilguard that the pronouns reflect how Rook sees himself and that they do not affect the gameplay. So why are they in the game then? What purpose do they serve other than a way for you to pander, of course? And remember those two questions that we talked about? The two questions you can ask about a game to see if it is woke or just progressive? The answer is unfortunately yes to both here, because both the top surgery scars and the pronoun thing do not belong in the game because they do not make sense lore wise, and of course they add nothing to the game other than a way for the studio to pander and virtue signal. So let's discuss why this makes absolutely no sense lore wise first. The reason is simple, really. I mean, why would anyone, in a world filled with magic, potions, and even spells that can help you transform into literally anyone or even anything that you want, still choose to mutilate themselves in such a way? Also, when, if at all, was it discussed in the game throughout its 3 installments so far that surgery is somehow so advanced in this medieval dark fantasy world that they can perform such massive surgeries? Oh, and I forgot, before anyone brings up Krem, no, that does not count at all because Krem was part of the Kunari, and we already know that their society views gender and gender roles very differently. But nowhere was it mentioned that Krem had undergone a sex reassignment surgery in the middle of this dark fantasy medieval world. And she was just a woman who wanted to be a man and joined the Qun to live as one, and the Kunari just accepted her as a man. I would also like to add here that people do not complain about trans characters as long as they are written into the story organically and it makes sense lore-wise as well. I could bring up Baldur's Gate, for example, but like I said in another video, comparing Bioware with Larian Studios is just way too unfair. So we will take Hanley Abrams as an example from Mass Effect Andromeda instead. So, Hanley Abrams is a trans character that, while poorly handled, as Bioware has stated, at least made sense in the context of this futuristic science fiction world where technology is advanced enough to even travel to another galaxy. People back in 2017 were not complaining about the fact that a trans character existed in the game, but that it was just too unrealistic for that character to reveal the fact that they are trans the minute you talk to them. People never complained about Shale not feeling like either gender either, because it made sense because now she was a golem, so her gender was irrelevant anyway. So this is just an example for those people in this fandom that scream at us for supposedly being so many different types of phobic just because we said that in a dark fantasy medieval world full of magic where the state of surgical advancement is just questionable at best, a person choosing to still mutilate themselves when the ability to transform into whatever or whomever they want exists makes absolutely no sense, and it is clearly just a way for the studio to pander and virtue signal. But this is not so much of an issue because, fine, if you do not want your game to sell, that is fine. If you only want to target the audience you are pandering to, that is also fine. But in my opinion, this obsessive need for this group of people to just always want to see themselves in literally everything they consume, in movies, in series, in games, in books, this only helps reinforce their narcissistic and obsessively egocentric view of the entire world. Because no story can be just a story anymore. Everything is about me, 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 me. Everything has got to include the exact political and social view of the world that I have, otherwise, that piece of entertainment is not worth consuming, and everyone that does consume it is some type of phobic, a bigot, and of course, my quote unquote enemy. RPGs used to be about role playing, experiencing a story through different points of view, aka characters. I have even played RPGs where you have to play as a man, or I have even created male characters to play as, and I never felt like I could not enjoy the game just because I am playing as a man. Because I play games to have fun and to get my mind off of my everyday troubles and problems. I do not self-insert, and I do not play a game to see my exact self and sociopolitical views reflected in it, or have a multi-million company preach at me and tell me how to think and feel about the modern day issues that plague the world. However, nowadays, RPGs are treated either as a dating sim or as a way for people to self-insert in the game. They are not about role-playing anymore. It seems like everyone just focuses on how many of their modern day political views are reflected in the game and not about the political landscape of the game itself, for example. The real and modern day issues can, of course, be discussed in a game as long as they make sense and they fit organically into the story, however. Because the only thing achieved by preaching to people about modern day political issues in worlds that they are trying to escape into is just to make said people not only disregard and roll their eyes at you, but even make them hate whatever it is you are trying to push, because they can literally not escape your holier than thou attitude anywhere. And on top of that, you have also ruined the fictional world they were using as a safe haven from everyday life. People use video games to escape modern day politics, issues, propaganda, and problems in general. They want to come home, power on their favorite video game platform, start their favorite game, and escape their troubles. They do not, however, want or even need you to be there preaching and morally berating them about modern day issues and telling them what to say, what to think, what to feel about said issues either. So, the stop surgery scars, as well as the pronouns, have no place in this game because they make no sense in the context of this game.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
It was only added as a way to pander to that specific group of people, and it's so obvious. And while studios are focused on pleasing and pandering to that group, the real fans, who are the majority by the way, get left behind. And they just decide that, you know what, the game is not for me anymore, and walk away. Because whether directly or indirectly, most studios nowadays tell us that if we do not like the game, then we just should not buy it, or they will say that the game was not even made for us in the first place. But when their game inevitably flops, we are somehow still responsible for it flopping. So make it make sense, because this truly makes zero sense to me.